Hello, my name is Dr. Nimali Fernando, and I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And today I'm joined with my team members from the Dr. Yum Project. And we will be talking today about parenting joyfully in a pandemic and making sure your children are having lots of fun as they're learning to eat new foods. So I first want to thank the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority for making this program a reality. Thank you very much for your support of this programming. Let's get started. So today's program is about teaching kids to eat nutritious foods in a fun and joyful way. The more joyful and positive we can be around our experiences with food, the more kids will want to try food and the more fun they'll have at meal times. So we want to engage all of the senses and make sure to have lots of fun as we're teaching kids about food. For those of you who have not been attending our webinars, I want to just start with a little background about us. As I said, I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is about 50 miles south of Washington, D.C. And I'm also one of the founders of the Dr. Yum Project, which is a nonprofit organization in Fredericksburg. And our mission is to help families and communities overcome barriers to eating well. We have a number of programs that help accomplish that, but the one program that we're focused on right now is the Dr. Yum Preschool Food Adventure. Over the past 6 years, we have written and rewritten and perfected this preschool-based learning experience for children, generally around age 2 to 6 in schools. And it is a monthly cooking curriculum really meant to help families and children learn how to go on a food adventure that's joyful and learn how to eat great foods. A lot of our experience that we share with you in this series is based on our experience with teaching kids in the classroom over these past 6 years. This is my character, Dr. Yum, who is featured in our preschool curriculum. And next to her is my friend, Coach Mel. Coach Mel is actually a character based off my dear friend, Melanie Potok, who is a specialized professional in feeding disorders in children. She spends her time teaching children who are typically developing all the way to children with more challenging medical issues, and she helps coach those children on how to eat the most nutritious food possible. And the two of us co-authored the very first edition of Dr. Yum's Preschool Food Adventure. We also wrote a book called Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, which we wrote because we really wanted to help families understand that feeding is a developmental process and that parents can learn about that developmental process and be proactive in fostering that development. And so this book is a collaboration of the two of us, and we really felt that it was important for parents to understand that parenting strategies around food can be very helpful as well. So throughout this series, we've been featuring some of these parenting strategies, and in our book, we feature 7 parenting strategies. And today's parenting strategy is about parenting joyfully. So these are strategies that can help overall with your parenting, but can be particularly helpful in the kitchen where you teach children how to eat. So our tip today is that children need to learn to eat more easily when parents take a joyful approach at mealtime. So instead of worrying about nutrition, take time to enjoy preparing food together and appreciating foods using all of the senses. And I'm going to introduce in a little bit Sarah and Wendy, who will really expand on this. So remember that meal times are about joyful family connections, more so than keeping track of how many bites a child is eating of their vegetables. That comes later. We first really want to have fun with food. So before we can talk about having fun, there may be some of you out there who have children who are really nervous about food, and it feels like having fun might be hard to imagine because you yourself may be experiencing anxiety about your anxious child, and it can be kind of a vicious cycle. So I wanted to just address how some kids may really be anxious and it may be hard to find the joy, and to explore a little bit about how that child may have become an anxious eater, or even how that child, that anxious eater, may have gone even further down that path and developed a feeding disorder. I think that's important to understand so that we can figure out how to come out of that cycle. So first of all, how does a feeding disorder develop? It first can start with physiology. That's how our body really works. And it may be that for kids with more extreme anxiety or feeding disorders, that there may have been some disruption in the physiology of that child that starts a pattern. Examples that we give are a child that may have had a food allergy, or a child that may have had pain from reflux. And so those types of disruptions in physiology can make it challenging for kids to feel comfortable with food. And they may learn that food can be uncomfortable. And because of that discomfort, they may start to learn different adaptive feeding behaviors to lessen that discomfort. And so sometimes that's avoidance of food, or avoidance of certain types of food. And that can be challenging for parents who really want their kids to eat all types of food and to enjoy it. And so parents then may react, trying to help their children, but may by no fault of their own, start to accommodate those learned feeding behaviors. And so that over time can really affect the family dynamics, because we're reacting and trying to make that child comfortable, which may actually not be the way to address the feeding disorder. And so we can create these family dynamics around food that can eventually lead to food being an anxious experience and far from the joyful experience that we hope that mealtime should be. So in the process of thinking about anxiety disorders, feeding disorders, and picky eating, we should really understand that these can be overlapping. So there may be kids who have picky eating that also have overall general anxiety. Some of these kids may have feeding disorders, and you can see that there can be an overlap of these three entities: picky eating, anxiety disorders, and feeding disorders. And so it's important, some of the strategies that we use to help that picky eater or that child with a feeding disorder may actually lie in addressing overall anxiety. So how do we know how to help that child? Because sometimes the experience of that child may be a little bit out of our reach. The way that we help may be out of our reach. We may not have all the tools at home to be able to help that child. And so, like anything in pediatrics, early intervention for kids with particular developmental issues can be the most helpful, and getting folks on board who are trained in helping kids with particular issues like feeding disorders may be necessary. So how do you know if your child is just a picky eater, or perhaps they have more severe challenges that would require a referral to someone with help? So I listed some of these here. Consistent gagging may be one. And I think we went backwards here. Gagging, strong verbal or behavioral resistance, consistent avoidance of food or disinterest in food, consistent resistance to interacting with a new food, or any of the sensory experiences around food. And in general, if a family is feeling particularly anxious or stressed about mealtime, it may be worth discussing with your primary care provider, like your pediatrician, to see if a referral may be helpful to your child and to your family. Okay, so I am going to now introduce my teammates, and they're going to give us a little bit more information about some of the topics that we started here. So I am pleased to introduce to you Sarah Moran, who is a registered dietitian with the Dr. Young Project, and Wendy Cannon, who is a preschool teacher and our preschool curriculum coordinator. And the two of them are going to talk a little bit about how we can help some of these more anxious kids, these hesitant eaters, and provide a really joyful approach at mealtime.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, so we'll get started talking about some more of this stuff that Nimali already addressed and kind of digging into it a little bit deeper. And so to start off, we wanted to talk a little bit more about the anxious eater and avoiding food or hesitancy around different foods. So the first thing to know is that some hesitancy around food is normal. So it is normal for kids to be a little cautious around new foods. And so that can start around age 1. So that's something that is common, and it's just part of growing up, right? Kids, as they get older and they start to explore the world a little bit more, they start to have some caution, which is good, right? It keeps them safe to be a little cautious while they're exploring new things. So that's really important, especially because when kids first start off eating food and they're, around that 6 months age and they're really excited and interested in everything, a lot of times parents can feel discouraged as their kid gets a little bit older and they start to be a little more hesitant, and they might think, what's going on? Why did this change? Is something wrong? When really that is just a normal part of their development. So that's an important thing to know, is that some hesitancy is normal, it's to be expected, and it's just part of them learning about the world. On the flip side, you can also have stronger anxiety around trying new foods. And so this can happen because of some of the things that Nimali talked about. So some of the different issues that can then lead into a feeding disorder. And that is different from just the typical run-of-the-mill being a little cautious about trying new things. So it can affect some children, and it's important to recognize when it's happening so you can address it, figure out what's going on, and get extra help if you need it. And the really important thing to think about when we're talking about kids being hesitant around food is that we don't want to force kids to taste foods. So when we force kids to taste, that can actually make the anxiety go farther up. And so what we want to do is try exploring the foods with different senses, so whether that's touch or smelling, but also to go slow and have fun and have that joyful experience and just be overall encouraging. One important thing to know, though, is that just because we don't want to force kids to taste, we still might need to give them a little encouragement to try new things. And I'm going to read right here a great explanation from Coach Mel, who is Nimali's co-author, and the little Coach Mel icon that you saw earlier. So for kids who are just age-appropriate, hesitant eaters, it's okay to say, like, oh, you don't have to try it, because they don't have any anxiety. They're capable of trying the food. They just, they'll get to it eventually. But if you do have a kid who has that high level anxiety, may have a feeding disorder, you need to give them the support to try the next step, because it's hard for them to get to that next step without that little extra bit of support. And as they keep avoiding the food, the problem just gets worse. The issue doesn't resolve on its own. So instead, what Mel recommends is that you state what is happening. So as long as the child is capable of doing that thing. So you as the grown-up know, my kid can help cut up this broccoli. Okay, so then you just say, today we're cutting up broccoli. And then you just start cutting. So instead of asking or being like, oh, would you like to cut the broccoli? Just say, we're gonna do this, let's go. And that little bit of kind of setting the stage of this is what we're doing, that can help give them that support to take that next step that they might be a little bit afraid of. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And I think even a step beyond that is, you know, it might come to the point where you're saying, oh, we're all going to have a little bit of this on our plate today, so that they can get used to that food sitting on the plate, and not forcing the taste, but just helping them to get used to the next step after chopping it or touching it. And then maybe it's going to sit on the plate, and then maybe they might smell it, or maybe they might touch it to their tongue. And just incremental progress, but not giving up. Because to say to a child with a feeding disorder, you don't have to taste it, they're like, check that box.
Yeah,
I don't have to do this ever.
Right. And that's important to recognize, that it is individual, child by child.
Right.
So that's part of you as the parent or other adult in their life to kind of know that kid and where they are, and then also seeking out that extra help from professionals that specialize in this type of stuff if that's something that you need, and just making it custom for every kid and what's going to be best for them.
Exactly. Well, thanks for that really helpful explanation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the learning side, since I am a preschool teacher, and we do this in schools and we do this in our teaching kitchen. But our research from the preschool curriculum has shown improvement in 3 big areas for kids when they are exploring food and having fun. What our research is showing is that kids cooking together can help them learn to, 1, enjoy foods more, 2, become more willing to try foods, and 3, refuse foods less. And so those are really huge, you know, it's a huge deal when kids are learning those next developmental steps to be able to enjoy it. And so that's why we're really focusing on bringing the joy into exploring food today, using all of the senses. So what we do with our preschool curriculum and in our teaching kitchen is we want to encourage a sensory exploration of all of our foods. So you can see a little graphic here of our, what we call our mindful kids. And if you tuned into an earlier episode where we talked about being mindful around food, which is really just means that you take time to appreciate all of the unique and special qualities about food. And so you can see the girl with the beet is looking at it, and the girl with the pineapple is holding it, because pineapple is a wonderful one to explore and see how it feels. We have a child smelling the kiwi and tasting the avocado. So, and we also want to talk about like listening. What sound do you hear when you chop? So all of those sensory explorations hopefully lead to the sense of taste, and children, as they get more comfortable with new things, will naturally want to taste them. So we are going to actually show you here some ways that you can encourage that sensory exploration. So we're going to get to some actual fruits here, and we're going to show how fun and joyful the experience of building a rainbow fruit salad can be. So there are a couple things that we want to start with. So children, this is mint here, and this is going to be part of our dressing for the salad. So what a great thing is for children to go ahead and rinse.
So we have a sink over here. It's outside of the frame.
Sarah's going to rinse. She's going to rinse that off. And I have this really fun little salad spinner. You can do this with any kind of greens or whatever. but the kids love to participate in this. So after Sarah gets that washed, I'm just gonna pop that in there, and then the kids can just sort of spin this around and spin that water right off of there. So that's a great activity for children, is washing and drying the produce. So we're gonna be zesting this lime. So I'm gonna have Sarah wash this. She could be one of my kid helpers washing the lime. And you always wanna have some clean dish towels for drying produce. And so kids can wash and they can dry. And when you're zesting a fruit, you want to make sure you do a really good wash on the outside, because you're going to be eating the outside of it. So we'll talk with the kids about washing everything, drying everything. It's a great activity. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to get some bowls here, because we have all the different colors of the rainbow here. You might not be able to see all of them in the frame, but trust me, we got all the colors of the rainbow here. I'll tilt it around a little bit. Okay, so one of the experiences that we can do is use our eyes and see how beautiful produce it is. So Sarah is going to be the grown-up in this experience here, and I'll be the kiddo.
Okay.
So Sarah is going to prep this pineapple so that it's ready for me as the kid to cut.
So you can see the pineapple, I've already cut off the top and the peel to prep it a little bit before us. But one thing about the pineapple, you may be able to see on the camera, is that it has this tough core here in the center that is really hard to chew and eat. So the first thing I'm going to do as the grown-up is prep this to get rid of that core. So I'm going to cut it in half. And this is the way, you know, I'm explaining this to you. Talk to the kids that you're with about what you're doing. Show them the core. They can see how it's different.
I want to smell that.
There you go.
Oh, that smells really sweet. It feels a little slimy a little bit.
Yeah, kind of fibrous.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to try to break it and see how it sounds. I heard a snap. Okay.
So then, as a grown-up, we're going to do some little planks here of our pineapple. So you can see, you could do it like that. If you wanted to, you could cut it in half again if you want to get a smaller chop. So you can give the kids a strip like this. It has a flat side, so it's very stable for them on the cutting board. And then they can take their knife and munch along.
I'm going to move this green bowl so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to get it really close here. So with our children, we're teaching them to hold their knife in the proper way. Make sure you have child-safe knives. Hold their knife and tuck their claw under. We have a puppy knife and a kitty claw, and I'm just holding on to the pineapple tight with my claw, and I can just munch away on that and put it right into the yellow bowl. So I'm getting that, all the smells and the feels of this pineapple, which is really wonderful. So we have some other things that, so
and rinse off the pineapple off my hands.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you another fun tool is a vegetable brush. And so it has two different sides here, and Sarah's going to scrub the apple. She can be one of the kids who's scrubbing the apple underwater, and then we'll prep that apple to show you how you can make it ready for children to chop.
Okay,
Dry.
some scrubbing. There you go.
So we scrubbed and we're drying. Okay, so in the same way, we always want to have flat surfaces on the cutting board.
Right, so you see the apple very rolly, and this is also really big, so hard for a kid to chop. But I'm just going to come and slice off a side here.
Okay, we'll put that over.
Yeah,
Put
so you
that
can see
over
we've
here.
got a flat piece. And for an older child, they could start with this and cut it into strips. But if we're working with a little kid, I'm going to go ahead and cut this into little strips, just like we did the pineapple. Like that.
Okay, and I'm gonna hold my knife and tuck my claw in and chop away. So now I really heard a crunch and a snap with the apple when I chopped that one. So that's one of our red. We also have some strawberries that we've rinsed. And this one you can hand right to the kids themselves. So you just want to teach them to get a little grip on the end of the strawberry and just cut the top right off. And then this method, just holding the strawberry with a thumb and finger on either side, and then the knife goes down in the middle, like that, to make two flats, and then they can do that method again. and chop. And I feel bumpy on the outside of this strawberry. So that's how to do a strawberry for kids. Let's go ahead and get some orange going.
Okay.
Maybe. So this is a great activity for kids for that fine motor work, is peeling. Anything that they can peel, and it's also getting that sensory, like, isn't the smell of orange?
Yeah, you can
happening for
smell
you?
the orange, and you can even, like, the outside of the peel is kind of this smooth, a little bit bumpy, but the inside is this kind of like fibery, a little bit, I don't know, slippery kind of feel.
It's great to build vocabulary too when you're working with different foods, because helping children to learn words to describe, instead of saying it smells good, or
I
I
like
like it, or I don't like it. It's helpful to get children to be a little more descriptive about what they don't like about it. Maybe they don't like the texture or the feel, and to help them find new words to describe foods. And so then this is very easy for your smallest kids to just segment the oranges and have them go right into the orange bowl. Okay, so I have a couple other colors. I've got green and purple. So let's go ahead and get some grapes, and we'll show about those. And then we'll be ready to make a yummy dressing for our rainbow fruit salad.
it.
So grapes are the same way as the strawberries. They're rolly, and you want to, especially with small children, you don't want to throw the grapes whole into your fruit salad, because they're a choking hazard for children, for young children. So you want to, once again, hold it between the finger and thumb and just munch right down in the middle and cut it the long way, not the round way, the long way, like that. So we'll have green grapes, and then we'll have some purple grapes. And we've already washed and dried these. That'd be a great activity for the kids. Another really great fine motor activity is plucking them off of the stem like that.
And as you're plucking and peeling and doing all of that stuff, that's also a great opportunity to discuss how food grows and compare the different foods. So we talked in a previous session with you all about how talking about how food grows, it helps kids learn about the world around them, but it also just has that extra level of connection to the food. Another way to think about it that can be interesting to them and might make them more excited to taste later on. So seeing how the grapes, come on this little bundle all tucked together, whereas the orange is one fruit with these sections. The pineapple, that's totally different from all the other things. So it's also a great chance to make those comparisons as well.
And it's a way for you to extend the conversation around the foods that you're using and making. So perhaps your children would be like asking you, wow, where does a pineapple grow? Well, that's the perfect opportunity to get online and Google and find pineapples being harvested in a field and watch a video about it. It's amazing. It's really, really fun. So we just like to encourage that extra exploration of all the different things. So what do you have for blue?
We have some blueberries.
Oh, beautiful. So those are just washed and dried by the kids, and they can go right in. One thing you want to always encourage while you're preparing food is tasting. So you don't have to make a big deal out of it, but say it's okay if you want to try something, just try it. And so you'll find that the relaxed feeling of just preparing food together in a joyful way will open that comfort that maybe someone will feel that pineapple and smell it and go, I think I do want to taste that today, and taste a little bit on the way.
And that's really the joyful part of all this, what we're talking about today. All of this is fun. You're getting to do all these different things. We're doing all the sorting. All of this stuff is play for kids. And,
Exactly.
We expect kids to play. We don't think that we have to force them to do it because they like doing it. And that's the same thing here with the food, doing these types of activities and focusing on more than just the taste, but all of the aspects of the food makes it a fun, joyful experience.
So let's talk about a couple other activities that we can do with this experience. One is zesting. And zesting is really great. I have some kids who are hesitant in my classrooms all the time. And a lot of them have sensory issues with touching things. So they're not really comfortable touching the wetness of the different fruits. So I'm usually able to really encourage them with zesting. And so for instance, I would hold, would you be me for a
Sure,
minute? And I'll be the
you.
kiddo. Okay. So I would hold the lime nice and steady for the child. And then the child can just come along and rub the little microplane, the little zester, and you can see the zest is collecting right in the top of that. And the child is safe because the blade is right on the fruit and the zest is just collecting right on top. And the child can then tap that out and smell it. It smells wonderful. So this would be something that we would be adding to the dressing, but this is a really non-threatening activity for one of your more hesitant kids who doesn't like to touch stuff. So maybe another thing would be tearing. And this is a great fine motor activity. So we would get the mint that's also going to be in the dressing and just get a leaf of mint. Sarah, what happens when you rub your fingers together on that leaf and then smell your fingers? See what?
They smell minty.
They do smell minty. I kind of like that smell. So let's tear this into teeny tiny pieces, okay? So this is wonderful. Like hold the leaf and use their fingers to just make teeny tiny pieces. And I just always encourage them. I'm like, oh, make it smaller, make it smaller. And you can really encourage those more hesitant children with a job like tearing herbs. And they'll stay at the table and work at this job for a good long while. So we've zested the fruit and then we're going to actually juice it. So we'll have the grown-up cut it in half. And then let's work together. So the grown-up can put a hand down and I'm going to put the kid hand on top and we're going to do this together. How are we doing?
We're getting some juice.
And it helps to encourage the child, oh, more pressure, push harder, you know, so that they really understand how this is working. And then you can see the juice is gathered along in the bottom of the juicer. And then we'll add our mint and our zest and a little bit of honey to that to make the dressing. So there are a couple other things that we can talk about when you're doing a food activity like this. One way to prepare this is to measure the fruits and put them all in a big bowl together. So perhaps you want a cup of each fruit. So this is a way to bring math into it. You could say, well, this is a cup. Oh, this is a half cup, and this is a quarter cup. So then you can talk with your children about how you can use fractions in cooking. So you might want to have everybody do 2 scoops of the half cup or 4 scoops of the quarter cup to learn that concept. And then finally, if you don't want to do it in a big bowl altogether, this is a beautiful exercise for the children to get their own fruit bowl and get a spoonful of each fruit from the rainbow that they want to try in their rainbow fruit salad, and then choose whether or not to drizzle a little dressing on or to leave it plain. But we like to have a lot of options when we're providing this exercise for kids to explore all of these different fruits.
And so you can see for a kid then, when they, instead of just being presented with this fruit salad that's been made somewhere else, and especially foods that have a lot of different things mixed together, kids can't really tell what's in there. They don't really know what's going on. Those types of foods can be especially difficult for hesitant or anxious eaters. So the difference between that versus this experience where they get to have a good time helping with the chopping, you know, this is work too. The food has to get made. So if you can bring them along in to do some of this work, they're learning skills, they're having a good time. And then when it's time to eat, they know every single thing that went in here. They've touched it, they've smelled it,
and maybe they tried it separately.
And they may have tasted it.
So if they've tasted the separate ingredients along the way, then they'll know, oh, wow, I want to have pineapple and green grapes and blueberries and apples in mine. And that's okay if that's all they're wanting to put in theirs, but just that encouragement all along.
And also with this type of meal that has a lot of different parts in this recipe, all the different fruits, it's a great opportunity for comparison. So sometimes kids can have a hard time knowing exactly how to describe something or knowing exactly what they like or don't like about it. But when they can compare it to something that's more familiar, something that they do enjoy, and see those differences, it really helps them to know each of these foods better because they can compare them to each other and see how they're alike and how they're different.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, and another thing, of course, all this helps with the fine motor stuff.
Yes,
so all the
definitely.
chopping, all the tearing,
Chopping,
all
tearing,
the pinching,
zesting, juicing.
So now we've talked about giving you an example of how to incorporate this joyful approach to food preparation and why it's so important. We did want to give you a little nutrition tip today because we haven't talked too much about nutrition because it's been a lot about the doing, but we did want to give you a tip about added sugars. So, oh, here's some great pictures of kids building skills. Look at them. They're mixing, they're chopping.
Chopping, mixing, and tasting. I love it.
So added sugars, what are they? What do we need to know? So added sugars are the sugars that are added to your food. So it's not the sugar that comes in an orange or in a pineapple, but it's the extra sugar added in, whether we're cooking or when we buy a food product. So this would be like white sugar, brown sugar, honey, maple syrup, all kinds of different
Agave,
sweeteners.
anything.
Yeah, all of those are added sugars. And so the reason we want to be aware of them, it's not that added sugars are bad or that we should never have them, but when we have too much, it can get in the way of good nutrition. So added sugars don't bring a lot with them nutrition-wise. They don't come with vitamins and minerals the way a piece of fruit does.
And they definitely don't come with fiber.
Right, right. So if we're eating a lot of added sugars, we get a lot of energy, but we're missing out on all those other pieces. So when kids fill up on added sugars, it replaces other foods that would give them all of those other things they need. So that's why we don't want to get too many added sugars. So we have a chart here. These are the recommendations from the American Heart Association. It breaks it down really nicely for you. So you can see the different ages, the recommendation, and then the average intake for American kids. So these, the average intake for you is going to be a little bit different depending on where you are, but you can see the recommended amounts for 2 to 3 year olds, 4 to 8 year olds, all the way up to 18, and for adult women is 6 teaspoons. So it's not 0. Having some added sugars is fine. You don't have to have any, but we have some added sugar in this rainbow fruit salad, the honey. But when we have too much, and what the average is for most people here, that's when we're getting in the way of that good nutrition because we're eating those foods instead of something else. Another way to think about this is that 4 grams equals 1 teaspoon. So a lot of times we see sugar expressed in terms of grams on food labels or different information you might be seeing. So 4 grams equals a teaspoon, which is a pretty standard measure that we use here. And that can kind of give you a reference point to think of exactly how much sugar
it's also
that is.
5 milliliters.
Or 5 milliliters.
Yeah.
So that's another way to think about it. So that's important to know. And then as far as labeling, so this is an example of a label here in the US. Nutrition labels are different all around the world. So of course you want to be thinking about what information is provided on different types of labeling where you are. But one thing we have is this line that's been added here recently to our label, which is for added sugars. So again, that breaks down for consumers here the difference between sugar that is already in a food, like the sugar in fruit or the sugar in plain yogurt or plain milk that's naturally in there versus added sugar that might be added to a flavored yogurt or a smoothie that has fruit but also has some added sugars in there, just so people can see and make sure that they're not getting too much of their energy in a day from the added sugars and they're really getting a variety of foods, because variety is what's good for good nutrition. And so we don't recommend that you count every single gram that your kid is eating or anything like that, but these are just good reference points. And some days you might have no added sugar, some days you might have a little bit more than the recommendation. If you're eating a dessert or something, it just depends on day to day, but they're just general guidelines and things to keep in mind to kind of give you that point of reference to see if what you are offering as the parent is going to fit in and help your kid have a good chance of hitting about where they want to be in terms of added sugars.
Sarah, I was wondering, on our website, we have all of our recipes that are available on dryum.org, and you've already done this similar, like a nutrition label for
Right.
each of our recipes. So people can click on that nutrition information and it'll drop down and they will be able to see any added sugars in any of our recipes that you may be making at home.
Right, right. So that information is there for you too. And this recipe, the rainbow fruit salad we made today, is a recipe on the website. So we're going to pull that up for you right now, just so you can see the rainbow fruit salad, and you'll see the nutrition information there. So if you go to the recipe section on the website, and then you can go to the search bar on the recipe side, and you can just type in rainbow
fruit, and it's going to pop right up.
There we go,
There it
rainbow
is.
fruit salad. So if you want to make this recipe with your kids, you can see it right there, and then the nutrition information is just that drop.
So if you click on the red bar, that's the nutrition information, then the nutrition information drops right under that, and you can see right there, added sugars is 3 grams, and the sugar that's naturally occurring in the fruit is 22 grams. And so that sugar is naturally occurring, that's coming with all that good stuff like fiber and all of the
vitamins, minerals, water, all that kind of stuff. Exactly. And a good thing to know is that the added sugars is included in the total sugars. So it's got 22 grams of sugar. 3 of those are added sugar.
Oh, okay. I see how that works.
So 19 grams is coming from the fruit. And also you'll see on this recipe, we do have a baby food option as well. If you scroll up a little bit above the nutrition info, right there. So some of the recipes have that. If you have very little eaters and then some older eaters and then the grown-up eaters, you can get some modifications using that baby food option, so that you can adjust it so that the whole family is eating the same food together and you're not making different things for different ages.
And one thing we always recommend with this recipe, if you're making it, is I don't know if you remember on the search bar when you typed in rainbow fruit salad, the next thing right next to it was called rainbow smoothie. And so if you do have some leftover fruit salad for the next day and it's maybe getting a little mushy and maybe not the best for eating as a fruit salad, then pull up rainbow smoothie, add some banana and a little bit of spinach, and you've got a wonderful way to repurpose those leftover fruit salad.
And that really goes back to if you were on our previous webinar, where we talked about, when we're trying these new foods, we obviously don't want to waste food. And if kids are still learning and they might not be excited about trying every little thing, thinking about, doing that planning and thinking about how you can incorporate foods into other recipes and, multi-purpose things can really help reduce that food waste. And so you can feel more ease as a parent letting your child explore, because if all the pineapple doesn't get eaten today, we can use that in a smoothie, or we can incorporate that in something else later on. So those
and I really like the fact that maybe your child only chose 4 of the fruits to make the fruit salad bowl, but then the next day in the smoothie is going to experience all of those fruits together in a different format, and it really does work. So I see that we have Dr. Young back to sort of round us out on this enjoying food joyfully.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, as a pediatrician, I see a lot of diet-related symptoms. And one of the symptoms I see very commonly is digestive issues. And Wendy, you mentioned fiber. A lot of these foods that are very high in added sugar may not have fiber. And at least in our American population, we're seeing a lot of kids with constipation and abdominal pain from constipation. And I think that's largely because of the lack of fiber in the diet and a lot of these refined foods taking up so much of their proportion of their diet and not having that fiber every day. So it really is better if we can eat our fruit and get sugars, natural sugars from the fruit, because as Sarah said, that's coming with lots of other nutritional benefits like fiber.
And I know Dr. Young's #1 prescription for many of her patients is the Green Dragon smoothie. If you want to look up another wonderful smoothie on our website, that's a key prescription, and it really helps with digestion because of all the wonderful things that are in it.
As you guys were showing the pineapple, and Sarah mentioned that core. So in our Green Dragon smoothie, we actually encourage using that core because there's so much fiber in it. And if you have a powerful enough blender, you can throw pretty much all the parts of the pineapple after it's been peeled, including the core, because that will provide even more fiber and can be really helpful for those kids who are suffering from the symptoms of constipation. And, you know, sometimes when we make a smoothie, we may have leftovers because most kids can't eat an entire blender full of a smoothie. So what I tell my patients is to actually use the smoothie leftovers to make a popsicle. And using popsicle molds, you can then preserve that smoothie and pull it out from the freezer. We talked last week about ways to preserve foods and make sure we're not wasting foods, and frozen foods are a great way to do that. So you can pull some of those, some of that smoothie out as popsicles, and children really enjoy popsicles, especially in the summertime when it's hot. It's a nice way to beat the heat.
Or if you can say they can have a popsicle for breakfast, that's kind of fun.
That's right. Exactly. So I'm wondering if we may have some questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to clear out our space here so we can bring our computer a little closer and see any questions that might be coming in or anything that.
While we're waiting for questions, I'll show you our Green Dragon smoothie in case anyone is interested. This is my go-to smoothie to help kids with constipation. And it's a very tropical sweet smoothie. It has a lot of spinach, but because the other ingredients are so kid-friendly and, you know, sweet, kids really enjoy this. And it has a very bright green flavor too. And that's something that you might enjoy making with your children. So there's orange, banana, pineapple, there's some lime. You can do some zesting work there using the rind even. Ginger, so that's also something you can use with your zester if you want to do some fine motor work there with your kids. Baby spinach, you can tear that as you're putting the spinach into the blender. And then for those kids who may need a boost of calories, I do have a lot of patients who are hesitant eaters, or even not hesitant eaters, but they may be needing extra calories for their growth. And so one option for this is to actually add some avocado. Avocado is really high in fat. So when we talk about getting kids to gain weight, we try to get them to add a little bit of fat in places in the diet that feel easy. And this is one where you can easily put a big slice of avocado into your smoothie, and it just adds that extra fat and calories.
It's also great for my daughter who's allergic to bananas. She always uses the avocado in place of bananas in the Green Dragon smoothie because it adds that creaminess that the banana sort of lends to a smoothie.
Right. Yeah, avocados are a great way to get some extra calories in, and you can use avocados in a sweet preparation like this, or in a more savory preparation like guacamole, with some tomatoes and other spices. And so it's a good practice food because you can practice it in different ways too.
And, this brings up a question that we get a lot talking about smoothies, but also with sugar is what's the difference between a smoothie and a juice? And how should I think about juice when it comes to this issue of sugar and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So even for people who say that they're going to juice some things for their kids, like how would you respond to that?
Well, so for me, when we're thinking about fiber, I think most kids in America are not getting enough fiber. And there are a couple things. When we juice a fruit, often we're getting rid of the fiber. And we're getting a lot of sugar, right? And fiber is one of these things that can modulate our absorption of sugar too. So when we eat fiber, it almost creates a bit of a gel coating in our intestinal lining. And so even though we may be taking 22 grams of natural sugars in a smoothie, we may not absorb all of that because the fiber almost creates a barrier. And it also allows that absorption to be much slower. So our body can adapt to that release of sugar a little bit more easily. So with juice, though, we don't have that fiber to modulate it. Often you can juice a lot of fruit, which means that's a lot of sugar in order to fill up your cup. So if you think about, an 8-ounce glass of juice might be 4 or 5 apples, whereas it would be much harder to eat 4 or 5 apples. A child would really have a hard time doing that, just sitting in front of, 4 or 5 apples and trying to eat that, because the fiber helps modulate how much we can eat. It takes up space and it gives us signals that maybe we should stop after 1 or 2 apples. So yeah, I think that, a small amount of home pressed juice might be fine as a treat, but I'd much rather see kids eating whole fruit and getting the fiber and nutrients from that whole fruit. Sarah, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would also add that another issue with juice, because like you were talking about, there's so much energy packed into something that's so easy to slurp down. Kids can fill up on juice and
Right.
they've got the energy that their body needs and they feel full, but now they're not ready to eat at meal times, or they've filled up on juice and so they're not getting that variety of different foods because they just don't feel hungry. And so sometimes parents might feel frustrated at a meal because they're like, it's time to eat, why aren't you eating? But maybe if a kid has been drinking a lot of juice throughout the day, they're just not hungry, and so they're not interested in all the different foods that are presented at the actual meal.
Right. Now, I will say that in some limited instances, I will recommend a small amount of full strength juice for constipation. There are three or so different juices that tend to have a high sugar load, which actually helps bring water into the gut and soften the stool. The 3 that I usually recommend are pear, prune, or apple juice. And it can work as a natural laxative for families that aren't comfortable giving a medication for constipation and they're working on the diet, working towards more fiber in the diet. Occasionally, I will prescribe or suggest using a small amount of full strength juice at breakfast time. One thing we do have to be careful, though, when we're sipping juice a lot, is that there is a lot of acid in juice. And so I usually recommend, because of that acid wearing on the very soft enamel of children's teeth, that can present a problem with tooth decay. So we want to always drink that small amount of juice with breakfast and not be sipping on that over the span of an hour or more, because that can set up their teeth for tooth decay. So there are limited ways that we can use juice, but always we want to be mindful that we're keeping it to a small amount and not getting too many calories from juice.
And
Are there any other questions that have come up in the chat?
I don't see any that have come through. I do know we can address another question that we get often, which is, my kid really likes sweet foods. So how do I, fit that into all the stuff that we've talked about today in good nutrition? And the first thing that I would say to that, if you're worried about your child liking or preferring sweet foods, is that it's normal to enjoy the taste of sweet things. Like, that's not a problem. We all enjoy sweet taste. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. But also knowing that, as we've talked about throughout these sessions so far, this is a developmental process, and that's part of it. Kids' taste buds becoming expanded to new and different flavors. So it's understanding that, your kid may very well like sweet foods. As adults, we like sweet foods too. But as the grown-up, you're providing the options, right? So when we're thinking about added sugars and all of those types of things. You're offering what the kid can pick from at the meal. So that's kind of your space where you can influence what's available, and then they over time
will
expand.
Their taste. Yeah, I see a question did come through about milk, I believe.
Is
okay.
drinking too much milk bad for kids? Sarah, I'll let you take that.
Okay, so milk can be a great source of calcium, right? So it's very easily absorbable calcium that's in milk. And that's one of the reasons that we oftentimes recommend it, because we all need calcium, but especially kids as they're growing and then getting into the teen years as well, in the preteen years, those are really important times for bone growth and bone density. So that's why milk is often recommended. But we also have to think about not everyone tolerates milk well. You may also be lactose intolerant. So milk isn't the only place to get calcium. You can also get it from leafy green vegetables, fish that has the bones in it that you eat, like sardines. So there are other ways you can get calcium in the diet. As far as too much milk, that can become a problem, similar to what we were talking about with sugar
about
or
getting
juice.
full. You know, if your child drinks a lot of milk, it just takes up too much of that hunger space, and there isn't room to be hungry for food.
And you know, if we're talking, sometimes you might have digestion issues too that come along with that. But milk is really good to offer at meal times.
That's what I was going to ask you, if that's a good time to sort of limit milk to meal times.
Right. Milk at meal times is a great beverage choice for kids. We also want to make sure they're getting the fat percentage that's right for them. So younger kids need whole milk for their brain development because they need more fat in general. But also, you know, milk at meal times is great, but then between meals, having water. And that's something we're going to go into a little bit more in a future session, as well as beverage choices and how to think about this stuff. But milk at meal times, water between meals is a good kind of rule of thumb.
All right. Is it recommended to pack sliced fruit pieces in the kids' lunchbox?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We actually have a post on the Dr. Yum website called Pediatrician's 10 Tips for Packing a Nutritious Lunch. And we break down lunch packing so that it's very easy to follow and almost is like a formula. And one of the things that you can pack to meet those criteria is fruit. So fruit slices, unsweetened applesauce. It's nice to have some fruit options that are a little bit less perishable too. So dried fruit without a lot of added sugar. Like I said, applesauce in small containers without added sugar, of course. And then fresh fruit. Of course, if you have fresh fruit, that is really the best option and probably the most delicious for kids. But I would recommend going to that blog post and following. There's a lunch packing map that you can use to help kids to pack their own lunch. So at the beginning of the week, you can say, okay, what grains do we have? What protein do we have? What fruits and vegetables do we have that are available? And then the kids can actually take the lead in choosing all 4 of those components and then packing them into their lunchbox.
I see my children like to drink milk instead to drink water. Is that okay?
I think one thing about milk that Sarah mentioned is drinking it with meals. And part of that too goes back to tooth decay. I'm always thinking about that because that's a very preventable issue in children. And it can really lead to other health problems with advanced tooth decay. So we want to do our best to prevent that. And milk is very acidic. So if children are drinking a lot of milk, particularly between meals, it can soften their teeth and make it easy for them to develop cavities. So I would suggest limiting milk to meal times, and really 2 to 3 cups is all a child really needs. More than that can put them at risk for other nutritional deficiencies, like iron deficiency in particular. Sometimes a lot of milk in the gut can be very irritating, and kids can have small blood losses, which can lead to iron deficiency anemia. And they're not eating iron-rich foods as much because they feel so full from milk. So we want to be careful that we limit it so that they're eating a wide variety of other foods. So 2 to 3 cups is probably enough for a day.
And we want kids to get used to drinking water as well and learn to
Right.
prefer water as a beverage.
Exactly.
I'm wondering about this question. Is it advisable to give the kids juice in the bottle or canned juices? So I'm thinking maybe you want to talk about, Dr. Young, the difference between having juice in a bottle versus in a cup.
Yeah, I don't know if they mean in an infant bottle or.
Yeah, that was my question because you know, I know that being a kid way back in the early 70s, and I was one of those babies with tooth decay because I had juice in a bottle, and the
Yeah.
sugars from the juice and the air from the nipple of the bottle just rotted out my 2 little front teeth. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know how you recommend, but I never put juice in a bottle for that
Yeah,
reason.
I think juice in a bottle is a recipe for tooth decay, and so I would not recommend it. I mean, I think the problem with juice is that it's too delicious. And it can be hard to limit it because it is so sweet. Our body craves sugar. As Sarah said, we need sugar. But you know, when you're parenting around that, sometimes kids really will test the limit. So the American Academy of Pediatrics actually recommends no juice under the age of 1, unless it's for particular instances, like I mentioned, like constipation. But in general, no juice is recommended at until 1. And then the recommendations are still very limited. So maybe 4 ounces for a child after the age of 1. It's hard, though, to limit to 4 ounces because juice is so delicious and kids will want an extra cup or an extra half of a cup. So what I tell my parents is to actually not buy juice because it's an expense. It can lead to tooth decay. And I'd rather see kids eating whole fruit rather than drinking juice. It doesn't mean that juice is bad. It just means that it might be easier to limit it by not having it at home. And then if you're outside of the home, if you're at a restaurant, if you're at a birthday party, allowing kids to have a cup of juice is fine. But you don't have to parent necessarily in your home any differently because it's just not available. The options at home, if you keep them simple, milk and water, it becomes much easier when it comes to parenting.
I know we're getting close to time, so
We are. I think we're just at time now. But thank you for all of your questions. It's always fun for us to answer questions from parents and learn what parents are thinking about. So thanks so much. Thank you again to the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority. And please tune into our next webinar where we will be discussing another parenting topic and how to make food fun in the home during this pandemic. And we appreciate your attendance this morning. Thanks so much.
thank you.
Hi,
Bye.
everybody.